All right, we're live.
Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in a minute or two. So if you're watching on the recorded version, you can just skip forward a little bit. And in the meantime, I don't know, my outfit is looking weird with the green screen today, but I might keep disappearing. I don't know. It's just the way that it seems to be for the day.
We can get started.
All right, sounds good. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Helen. I'm from Waypoint Immigration. I'm an attorney. So I specialize in EB-2 NIWs, and today we're going to talk about the proposed endeavor, specifically mistakes to avoid when you're thinking of what your proposed endeavor is. So just a quick recap, EB-2 NIW is self-sponsored application that you bring on your own behalf. You can be anywhere in the world. You can be on any status here. You can, there's no like specific status that you have to be in order to qualify EB-2 NIW. It all depends on what your proposed endeavor is, and that's how you, show that you would make a good applicant for this. So the proposed endeavor is just like a fancy way of saying what your future plan would be to impact America. So in order to think about what is that, there's definitely certain red flags there that one should avoid when you are, describing it to the officer, your attorney, although your attorney should pick up on these red flags and help you out. Well, the number one red flag is saying that you are just going to continue doing what you're doing. So this is showing the officer that, your proposed endeavor in their mind is tied to your employment, like specifically to your job, that you aren't really going to progress in what you're doing, that you're only going to have impact to your employer, and you need to show impact beyond your employer. You need to show how you're going to help America as a whole, with your industry, with progressing things with innovation, with contributing to the progression overall, and therefore having an impact on America. So typically the impact would be like economic, or like with public health, with tech innovation, helping some sort of infrastructure aspect, maybe something with policy. So that is all that's related to that. So when you're saying to the officer, I'm just going to continue in my job, they're saying, oh, wow, I know I got to back up here because this person's just going to keep doing what they're doing. They're not going to be that impactful person that we're looking for. So, when you're saying it in that way, that's kind of what the officer is hearing. So definitely want to avoid saying that. So instead, what you do is that you say, I'm going to, help improve public health access through AI-driven infrastructure with telehealth, or, it's just an example. But you're saying that basically what you're actually doing is your proposed endeavor. Like, what will that look like in the future? How will your methods and technologies and techniques kind of help build upon each other? What are your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? What is the meaning? Like, why would America care about what you're doing? How is this being impactful? Like I said, is there like a public health aspect where people would get diagnosed with cancer faster, or get better treatments, or have access to treatments that maybe they're in a rural area, they don't have access to certain things? So basically wanting to find out, why is this really important? How is it meaningful? And explaining that to the officer through what your proposed endeavor is. Then I would say another red flag is just saying something along the lines as to what you have done. A lot of this application, especially like the second prong where you're showing that you're well positioned to actually do this proposed endeavor, that is very much past focused. What have your accomplishments been? What was your education? What kind of jobs did you have? But when you're talking about the proposed endeavor, it's supposed to be future focused. What's your future plan? So talking in terms of, 1 to 3 years from now, 10 plus years from now, or you can label it as like short-term goals, long-term goals. What are you going to immediately do if this was approved? And this is really crucial, especially if you are not already in America, because they want to know if this is approved, how can you immediately affect change upon coming here? So, having some sort of a game plan in mind and telling the officer this is very important. And also, obviously, if you are in America, that's also important as well. Okay, so another red flag I can think of is if part of your proposed endeavor is to start a business. I have talked to so many people over the years and they're saying, oh, I want to start a business because then I can show the officer, I can create jobs, I can have economic impact. And they think, oh, yay, I'm going to get approved because I'm going to tell them I'm starting a business. But what they don't realize is that if you say you're going to start a business, you have to show them that you're capable of starting a business. So that means, what are your business skills? Do you have a business plan? Do you have any funding? Do you have any potential clients or customers? Is there a need for this business? So, you just can't say, oh, I'm going to start a business or I hear people are going to start a consultation company all the time. And it ends up actually not being really what they do want to do, which is important. You have to definitely be genuine. And, second of all, it's actually not as helpful as maybe you think because you do have to show all of these other things. A lot of the people I talk to have like the tech skills side of the business, where, they might be the technical person or whatever the actual niche is, but they have no business skills. So, then you have to say, are you going to align yourself with a partner? Do you already have a partner? Who is going to be your team? What kind of support will you have? Et cetera, et cetera. So just by saying you're going to start a business and therefore create jobs and have economic impact, that's not always beneficial, especially if that's not something that you actually want to do and have already started doing. But if it is something that you genuinely do want to do and you're just not there yet, you're still maybe earlier in your career, you're trying to gain those skills and kind of think of it as a future goal, you can absolutely put that as like a long-term goal where, maybe 10 plus years down the line, once you kind of get additional, experience and networking and kind of aligning yourself with people that would make sense to, do business with, you can say down the line in 10 plus years, I want to do a consultation firm or whatever the business is. And then you don't have to show business plan or customers or things like that, because that's too far out into the future to really have anything that's concrete and meaningful. But if you're going to be claiming an entrepreneurial route for your NIW, just keep in mind that there are a lot more things that the officer is then going to want to see in order to be able to come to the conclusion that you are capable of not only doing whatever the technical aspect and impact is, but the business side as well. So it really becomes like a two-sided argument that you have to show. Not only are you capable of having impact through whatever the business is, but you're also having impact through obviously creating jobs and having that economic impact as well. So let me think. Any other kind of red flags? So I already talked about continuing in your job, this entrepreneurial aspect, and then being future focused. I would say those are definitely probably the top 3 things that I see when talking about the proposed endeavor. Maybe a 4th one would be, once in a while, this doesn't come up as often. Sometimes someone's proposed endeavor is not in something that they have ever had experience in. So that could also be a problem. Your proposed endeavor should be related to your background, to what you've done. Obviously, I am an attorney, an immigration attorney. If I say my proposed endeavor is to do chemical engineering, No one's going to believe that I can do that. That I have no chemical engineering experience. I have no science background. I had a history degree as my undergrad. So it's completely unlikely that I would actually be able to do those things. So, it has to make common sense too. So while the proposed endeavor is very much future focused, you have to make sure that it aligns to you. It has to be you have to be capable of doing that. It has to align with, it has to make sense, common sense that, if I am an attorney, it would not make sense for me to do anything with, chemistry or engineering, chemical engineering, etc. So that's definitely something along those lines too. So once you establish what your proposed endeavor is, that is then when we apply it to the 3 different prongs of DANASAR. So everything relies upon what you're establishing your proposed endeavor to be. And if you have something in your background, for instance, I've seen people that maybe do a publication at the bachelor level, but now they're a PhD and they're doing something that's completely different than that publication that they did at their bachelor level. Like, we don't have to show that. It's not relevant. It has to be, evidence to prove that you're capable of doing what your proposed endeavor is. So if you have things that you have accomplished and they're completely unrelated, most of the time it's most beneficial to just not even bother. If you have other things that are certainly stronger aligned, kind of streamline your application and that sort of a thing. So making sure that you are being strategic and thoughtful with what you are using as your supportive documentation is very good. And I guess I would maybe say another mistake that I don't see as often, that doesn't mean it doesn't happen, is that, your proposed endeavor needs to align with goals of the United States, because that is part of the DANASAR prongs. The first prong that you have substantial merit and national importance. So, for instance, if your proposed endeavor would be something like, to open up a bookstore, you might have that entrepreneurial economic impact because it's a business, but the bookstore itself is not doing anything that's within the public national importance aspect. You're not revolutionizing the way that books are being distributed or, creating some sort of new innovative product. A bookstore is a bookstore, and it does have that economic impact, but the business itself has to also have national importance. You can't simply only have an economic impact in that aspect. So for proposed endeavor, that would not work for an EB-2 NIW to open up a bookstore, because the business itself needs to also be important. So another one, just trying to think on the fly here. If your proposed endeavor is to, I don't know, be a secretary or something like that, that is not really a nationally important, where you are creating impact beyond your employer, where you're creating change. You'd have to do something with like policy, or you would have to do something that would be maybe integrating some sort of revolutionary system. The standard secretary job is certainly not doing those things. So you have to make sure that whatever your proposed endeavor is, that it is impactful, that aligns with goals of America. So examples of proposed endeavors like AI in healthcare, where you're integrating, to create better diagnosis, or some sort of a biomedical device that is helping people, with their heart, or, whatever sort of a system. Healthcare is usually pretty great for proposed endeavors, because there's that public health aspect. And I've gotten a lot of clients, I guess at least lately, that are doing like AI integration in many different ways in public health. Those are usually pretty good. We also have lots of clients that are doing tech, where they are maybe updating systems or integrating new machine learning aspects, creating some sort of databases and data analytics, and using big data to, help make better decisions and things like that. Could also be things with infrastructure, with the grid, or maybe even the railroad, different kind of infrastructure like building projects. You could also be in green energy. So, we recently had a client that was in solar energy that was approved. You maybe not always align green energy impact with the Trump administration, but there are aspects that the Trump administration does find favorable if you're able to create energy independence from other countries, very much focused on America first, relying less on others. If anything that you do is related to that, you can still potentially align for an NIW, even if you are in the green space. So it just kind of depends on what you're doing and how that makes sense with the broader goals of the country as they stand at the moment. But if anyone has any questions, please feel free to pop it into the comments. And even if you're watching it on the recorded version, you can pop in a comment as well, and I can always go back and address that later. Do we have any questions so far?
Yeah. Just Caesar says hi.
Hi.
And Shalini asks, would moving to product management to build products be considered a good proposed endeavor?
I guess I would have a lot of other questions with that. Like, what are you doing exactly with product management? Like, if it has to do with the supply chain and bringing the supply chain to America, domestic supply chain, improving the supply chain, creating more efficiency or saving money, that could very much align. So I would have to get more specifics, I guess.
Anish asks, hello, I've done master in applied physics, in which I have only 2 conference paper in quantum technology, and I have also done 1 internship at Maybell Quantum for making dilution fridge for quantum technology. I'm starting my PhD in solar energy. Can I apply for EB-2 NIW?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that could work. I'd have to look at you individually, message me or could do an individual consultation. But typically, what I see right away, you have a master's degree, which is an easy way to qualify with that advanced degree. It sounds like you might already have some impact going on there. This is very much about what your future potential impact could be, but they do like to see examples of how you've already been impactful. So since you're kind of early on in that PhD program, it could still work out. A lot of the time, those that are in PhD programs, I probably typically say to wait until you're at closer to the end of your PhD program where you have more accomplishments. And then in the meantime, reach out and kind of get as involved as you can with conferences, publications, any sort of organizations and things like that. To kind of help bolster things to discuss as far as what your impact is. But, you could qualify while you're still in your PhD program. It would just have to maybe depend upon what those specific activities look like more.
Caesar asks, you recently mentioned about EB-1 criteria about original proposals have been creeping in EB-2 NIW criteria. Do you think it's a good idea to propose something original, or should be better to propose something that is already working in the market?
So, that makes me think of like software engineers. So if you are taking some sort of software that already exists and you're simply implementing it for an end client or something like that, that is not really impactful. So, you should probably be doing something innovative, whether it's like the actual item itself or some sort of new policy or way of implementing. Definitely just taking something that already exists and, setting up a client with it is not really impactful in the way that the NIW is meant to be. So definitely showing anything that is innovative, that is original, and that is part of the NIW. So, obviously EB-1A has original contributions, which has different kind of ways of measuring what that means. In an NIW context, it's different. So if you do have anything that is original and you can show that, that's great, but it's not shown in the same way as an EB-1A.
So, follow up from the question about product in payments, AI and data science.
I mean, generally speaking, integrating some sort of AI and data science to, it sounds like some sort of maybe retail aspect of like the supply chain. It could be NIW type of thing, but it doesn't just depend upon if your field is important. It depends if you as an individual are important in making that sort of an impact. So it sounds like the field might align, but then that doesn't automatically mean that you can get an EB-2 NIW. It goes by the individual.
Anicius, thank you.
Sure.
Caesar asks, can you apply to EB-2 NIW without going to any conferences?
Yeah, so the EB-2 NIW, the main thing is to show is your impact beyond your employer, and that can be done in many different ways. Real world impact. If you have some sort of reports or something that shows that you were able to increase efficiency or revenue or something along those lines, like measurable impacts. That's real world impact, and that can absolutely be used with different work projects and stuff like that. They do want to see what that looks like beyond your employer, though. So, like you just suggested, conferences can show that you are sharing your specialized knowledge with other professionals in the field. You can also do that through, publications or patents, or, like I said, a lot of our clients tend to show that real world impact through their job and their work product. And different work documents and things like that. So you don't have to have conference presentations or anything like that there. You just have to show that you more likely than not have that impact. So it doesn't matter about any one particular way. It's just kind of like an overall combination of things to show the officer.
Cronty asks, can you apply if you're improving processes in semiconductor field?
Yeah, so, semiconductors and kind of bringing that manufacturing back to America is very much aligned with what the government wants to do with the CHIPS Act. The CHIPS Act is a little bit, I guess, iffy at the moment because we're not sure how that's going to look now with Trump. I know he's had some sort of back and forth comments about it, about how it's getting funded, if he's going to repeal it and replace it. I'm not exactly sure where that stands right now at the moment. I haven't looked into it, but I've heard some things. So I'd have to do obviously some specific research, but typically semiconductors and bringing manufacturing processes to America does align with the NIW.
Rita asks, are we seeing RFE response for premium filing cases for NIW still taking 45 days, or we are getting responses earlier also?
So with the RFEs, if they filed a premium processing originally, they should also hear back earlier with that RFE response. I don't believe there's an exact timeline per se with the RFEs as strictly and done like as a, sorry, I'm talking over myself. So the timeline, I don't think is quite as strict at the RFE stage that it is with the original application stage, but you should still hear back within like the 45 business days. And then if you don't, then you can, we reach out to them and we find out, what's happening. And then but usually they don't give you a refund or anything at the RFE stage. It's only if they go beyond that 45 business day with the original application, of which they would then give you a refund if they do go past that time frame.
Audrey asks, can one apply for an NIW with one peer-reviewed article as well as multiple conference poster presentation?
See, that's this is part of the problem that I think a lot of people are confused about. There is no specific amount of evidence, or, I can't just say, oh, yes, one conference is going to do it. It all depends upon your overall profile. What is your impact? One conference might make a difference for someone if it's super, prestigious and a lot of results came from it. Otherwise, if it's just a typical conference, then it may not make that much of a, it might tilt things a little bit in your favor, but it's not like there's any one particular conference or piece of evidence that we can say, oh, yes, that's absolutely 100% approvable. It all depends on what's your impact beyond your employer. And that looks different for everybody. So there is no cookie cutter way of just saying, oh, yes, if you have 10 publications with 100 citations, you're going to be approvable. There is no attorney in the world is able to actually say that and be accurate without, it's just, like I said, it just depends on the individual, and the question in and of itself just doesn't really align with what the NIW is supposed to be. So, there is no real answer for anything that is like that.
Joe asks, I'm currently working for a company as a manufacturing engineer which makes tools for R&D for universities and research institutes, companies, etc. Most of the R&D work is related to improving materials and processes in semiconductor manufacturing. I've been able to be a part of a lot of key decision-making processes in the ongoing projects. Can I use that for my case?
Yeah, I mean, you can obviously use that for your case, but it depends on what kind of evidence do you have of that. Because anyone can say anything in the application, but the evidence is really what speaks for itself. If you just have arguments without any sort of paper trail or things that kind of tie you to that impact, tie you to those decisions, showing the officer why that's important, how that makes a difference, how does that impact beyond just your company. So yeah, I would say that, something like that could be used, but whether or not it's going to make a difference is what kind of evidence do you have of it?
Ranti says, thank you.
No problem.
Diana asks, are you seeing any trends in how favorably officers exercise discretion in this administration and NIW cases compared to the previous administration?
I don't know. I guess that's a little tricky. I feel like, our fees kind of definitely were triggered towards the end of the Biden administration, maybe a little bit heavier than, previously in the Biden administration, but it's definitely started, I would say, like in the fall. So I feel like it's gone from end of Biden into Trump, and it hasn't really, I don't know if I would say it's necessarily changed from one to the next, other than maybe if you had applied during the transition, maybe the officer kind of, they don't ever say this, but, they want to maybe see if it does still align under Trump as president, with the different goals of the country now. But overall, we are seeing still a mix of straight approvals, RFEs, and then approvals after RFEs, and then, occasionally denials after RFEs. So, I would say in the last, 6 months or so, it's been kind of negligible, the difference.
Rami asks, is a rewarding email from PhD advisor or annual performance reviews any helpful?
Yeah, so if you have emails that, are from a professor or they're from, your employer or something, and it kind of says that you did a great job in a project, you can certainly print out and use that email. I don't know what the other half of that question was. It was emails, and then it was something else.
Annual
Sorry,
performance
I
reviews.
forget. Oh, performance reviews, right. Yeah, so you can show performance reviews because, especially if they say what kind of things you're working on and that you're doing a good job, and like, it depends on the company, obviously, as to maybe how detailed any of those things are, but you're at least showing to the officer, yes, I am actually employed and I am working on these projects that I am claiming to be. You use reference letters for that too, but then this is another like objective third-party evidence document that will just further corroborate any claims and reference letters and things like that. So that's definitely good to have a paper trail as much as you can to show that you are doing these things.
Right. I think that's all the questions. Anything else you want to cover?
No, I mean, I guess just to kind of wrap up, these NIWs really are about showing strong evidence of what you're claiming, because people can just say whatever, but they want to make sure that you are actually doing the things that you're claiming. And it's very much about what's your impact. How is that look for everybody is different. So we actually have free assessments on our websites. If you did want to, go to our Waypoint website and submit for a free assessment, we can look at your specific profile and start a conversation as to what that looks like for you, because it is very much an individualized sort of application. So what might work for someone else may not work for the other person, and it's kind of hard to just generalize some things sometimes without having more of a detail from the person.
Great. And now Ruby just sends, thank you very much for the helpful presentation.
Thank you all for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.